Welcome back to another edition of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden. This is being broadcast live from the nation's capital in Ottawa, and we've got a lot of material to go over today. But I wanted to open with this. That, of course, was Jane Goodall. And when we come back, I'll explain why I put that up.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist. Yes, please subscribe to the station. We're fighting back from the suppression we're getting from a certain internet social media company that is really trying to bring the station down, but we're fighting back. And I'm optimistic. We've got a great week ahead of us, by the way. I want to say yesterday, I had a really nice afternoon, just sort of sitting around with my friend Mark from the church I go to here, and we just listened to music. And that's something people don't really do anymore, is communally just listen to music and say, hey, did you hear that? And a lot of, I sang jazz music, lounge music for many years. And, I think I should do it again because it's really one of the joys of my life I miss most of all. That's just wanted to share that with you at the outset. This is, it's always nice to open up to my audience. Of course, a week ago we were at the Jimmy Dore concert or the comedy night. That was fantastic. But tonight I'm just staying home. This is going to be a restful Sunday for me. Interesting story. 2 people charged with arson, accused of starting fires in Saskatchewan. Now you saw it. It was so predictable. As soon as these wildfires started, has to be climate change, even though there's no evidence correlating wildfires to climate change. There's no science behind it. It's just fear mongering. But here we go again. This is what happened the last time we had wildfire. People were arrested for arson. Are these people just trying to prove that climate change is behind wildfires by starting them so they could say, even though it's arson, we're not going to admit that. We're just going to say it's climate change. Is that what's behind this? Because I looked at a fact check, and of course, the fact checkers don't want to admit arson was involved. But clearly, this is the CBC. This is not new media, independent media. This is not media that is in any way critical of the climate change agenda, of the climate change narrative. So the CBC is admitting 2 people were charged with arson. I think it's probably true. And here's that wide awake media. I encourage you to have a look at this X. What they're posting on X is absolutely fantastic. And here's Jane Goodall saying, we just got to have fewer people on the earth. And she's in her 80s or 90s now. So, I mean, she's nearing the end of her days, but she'd like to see the human race culled. Why? Why? Why are we subservient to the earth? These people are anti-human. They want to kill off the human race because we're somehow destroying the earth, as if the earth is subject to us. Anyone who believes in God understands that. We are not subject to the earth. That is beyond paganism. It's stupidity. But there you go. Now, before I get into Mark Carney in China, I want to remind you all about the Strong Borders Act. Yeah, it is in front of the House of Commons right now. And this is the bill that's going to allow the RCMP and the Canada Post to open your mail. It's going to involve massive internet surveillance and the beginning of digital currency in this country. And we'll be showing what Pierre Poilievre is doing in his spare time right now. And it's not criticizing this bill. He's talking about a lot of other issues. Maybe they're important, but I can tell you what's more important right now is that we're going to have massive internet surveillance. We're going to have digital currency. We're going to have a national database, and you'll be on it. And we'll get more about that later. And we are literally 3 or 4 steps away from a nuclear war in Ukraine because of the idiocy of senators like Lindsey Graham and the idiocy of politicians like Mark Carney and Keir Starmer, Prime Minister of the UK, and French President Emmanuel Macron, who are just raving mad. They want a war with Russia, even though they're going to get annihilated in a war with Russia. They're in no position to have a war with anybody. Their militaries have become horrible, horrible jokes, just like Canada's military. And Mark Carney talks about strong borders. He talks about a strong national defense. Where do you think the billions of dollars he's spending or proposes to spend? Once again, without even tabling a budget, where do you think the billions of dollars are going to go? Probably to Ukraine and to the European Union, because he wants to join that little military club too. So we remain a member of NATO, which I think is way past its due date. But we're also going to join the European Union Defense Force. This is just insanity. I'm sorry, but this is. Let's have a look at, okay, Mark Carney wants to normalize relations with China. Let's hear what that's all about, because I'll interrupt and I'll remind you about how normal relations are between Mark Carney and China.
Minister Mark Carney also spoke to his Chinese counterpart today. It's a significant move considering the trade tensions between the two countries, which is affecting billions of dollars in goods. Now, Carney agreed to continue high-level talks with Beijing to try and resolve those issues.
Do you trust China?
We have, this is the start of a process of recalibrating the relationship with China. It's very important that we reopen dialogue. We have a number of trade disputes with China. Farmers across this country, fishers across this country are being affected by Chinese tariffs. People across this country have been affected by fentanyl and its precursors. Those are issues I raised directly.
We'll get back to that in a second, but do you remember this? This is just before the election campaign. Pierre Poilievre actually ferreted this story out, and this is my story in the Post-Millennial. Poilievre caught Carney securing a $276 million loan from the Chinese central bank while he was in Beijing last October, ostensibly representing the Canadian government, or at least the Prime Minister's office. But he was supposed to be there representing Canada. He was there representing Brookfield Asset Management, and he got a $276 million loan. So why does he expect us to believe that relations between Mark Carney and China aren't just wonderful? And I'll remind you later about exactly what Mark Carney has said at a 2019 Jackson Hole, Wyoming speech when he was still governor of the Bank of England. What he said about China. I'll remind you about that later, but let's get back to this absolutely fascinating interview.
So here's a reminder of the tariffs that are in place. Last fall, Canada followed the U.S. and slapped a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs. Canada also hit China with a 25% tariff on their steel and aluminum. In retaliation, China imposed a 100% tariff on Canadian canola products, along with a 25% duty on Canadian seafood products and pork. With more, we're joined by the former Canadian ambassador to China, Guy Saint-Jacques. Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Saint-Jacques.
Thank you for the invitation.
In the readout from the Chinese government, there was a lot more detail than we got from the Canadian government. It said that the call came from Prime Minister Carney at his request. What do you make of that outreach?
Well, I think it's an important step that the Prime Minister knows that he has to improve relations with China, with India, as we just heard. And in the case of China, he knows that a level of dialogue is better than no dialogue at all. And he knows that Canadian farmers, especially in Western Canada and in Quebec in terms of the pork, have been very affected by the tariffs that were put in place by the Chinese. But I think, we have heard him during the electoral campaign talking of China as almost an adversary. So he knows what he is getting into. And
he means adversary. Mark Carney does not view China as an adversary. Let me remind you, when he spoke to the Jackson Hole Economics Summit in 2019, as the governor of the Bank of England, he said the US dollar must be replaced with the Chinese currency. He said the United States must be surpassed as the world economic engine by China. He has been in China's pocket for quite some time. You will not see Mark Carney moving against fentanyl because China wants to export it into Canada. You will not see Mark Carney normalizing anything. Normal to China is having Chinese police stations across the country. Normal to China is harassing Chinese dissidents. Normal to China is trying to abduct Chinese dissidents and bring them back home to China so they can be punished. That's normal for this guy.
I think that the dialogue will allow the opportunity to raise the difficult issues with China related to their interference, their past interference in Canadian elections, the repression that they are conducting among the Canadian Chinese community, and also, it's an important partner in terms of the influence it has on Russia, and it's one country that could speak to President Xi could speak to President Putin to convince him to stop the war in Ukraine. Xi also can speak with the North Korean leader. So for all those reasons, I think if we get into this and we are very clear on our red lines and what we expect from the Chinese in terms of future behavior, I think we could hopefully get some dialogue going. Of course, it will never be as it was in the past. But at the time where we need to diversify our trade from the United States, China remains an important partner, and there is still good business to be done there.
When you talk about it can never be like it used to be, a couple of weeks ago on this show, former Canadian diplomat Michael Kovrig said that a full reset of Canada-China relations is not even possible. He added that instead the government should be focusing on building stable diplomatic relations with Chinese officials to mitigate any possible of worsening the relationship. So in your mind, what does that concretely look like?
Well,
I got to interrupt again because this is the two faces of Mark Carney again. And I've been talking about this ever since Mark Carney entered the political scene. There's at least two faces, maybe three. But Mark Carney is pretending, of course, that he has to normalize relations with China, even though he's had a personal relationship with China and Chinese leaders, Chinese bankers for decades. Mark Carney is welcome in Beijing. Mark Carney is a guest of honor in China. And he has been working for China's good, just as he wants to devalue the Canadian and the US dollars. I had an episode on this about a month ago with a banker from Alberta who explained this whole thing. And it's fascinating. Mark Carney has an agenda, and he likes to talk about things that sound good, that sound a little bit conservative. He likes to talk about strong borders, but we know what that's going to. Massive surveillance is what strong borders means. He likes to talk about strong national defense, but it's going to be a strong defense for Europe and more billions of dollars wasted in the black hole of Kiev because that country is teetering on the brink of collapse and defeat. He likes to talk about affordable housing, but what are we going to get? Soviet-style block housing. It's going to be a nightmare. It's not, he doesn't mean what Pierre Poilievre means by affordable housing. He's not talking about a single family dwelling where a family can have peace on a safe street. No, he's talking about putting thousands of people into humongous apartment complexes, probably sharing the room with other people, but it's going to be affordable. That's what Mark Carney's talking about. When he talks about safe streets, he's really talking about a safe internet, and he wants to get disinformation and misinformation off the internet, so Liberal Party talking points are all we're going to get. That's where he wants. That's what safety means to Mark Carney. I have to keep explaining this because Mark Carney's very good at masquerading as something he isn't, namely a moderate or even a small C conservative. He's not these things. He's still the same Mark Carney who was the globalist, the UN goodwill ambassador for climate change, the World Economic Forum crony, and an international banker. Let's listen to a bit more of this.
What was announced is that the Joint Economic and Trade Commission will meet. That's the appropriate forum to discuss commercial, trade, financial issues. It's a very important forum, but also it allows discussion on other issues where we need to tell the Chinese that we have learned a lot about their behavior in the last few years, that China has become a lot more aggressive in the South China Sea, in the Eastern Sea also. And we know that they are supplying lots of products that are used by Russia in its war with Ukraine. They are providing also intelligence that they capture from with their satellites. The Chinese vessels are suspected of having cut cables in the North Sea. So those are issues that need to be discussed and to tell the Chinese government about our views on how they should behave if they want to be accepted as a trade partner.
All right, that's probably enough of that. I've got another 2 minutes to go, but I've heard enough. I'm sure you have too. Mark, none of this bothers Mark Carney. None of this bothers Mark Carney at all. That they're increasingly aggressive in the China seas, that they're increasingly aggressive towards Taiwan, because Mark Carney wants the Chinese to succeed and to surpass the United States. Mark Carney, much like Justin Trudeau, admires China. And he really thinks that's where the future is, with China. And he wants them to replace the United States. Even though he's playing this footsie with Donald Trump, and he's so friendly with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is so friendly with Mark Carney, it's a game. It's a big game. And that's where are we headed with this? We're headed for Chinese dominance and Mark Carney being under China's thumb and Mark Carney remaining in the pocket of China. Now, I want to get to this next because this is absolutely fascinating. And I have to confess, I got this from the Moose this morning, who did some really good research on this. And if you go through this World Wildlife Fund report, it's absolutely fascinating. And I didn't expect climate change hysteria to be rebuffed by the WWF. But that's what this report does. If you go through this report, it essentially says that Canada is absorbing more greenhouse gases than it's expelling. So we're already at net zero. So why are we punishing the oil and gas industry? We're probably below net zero. This is a fascinating report. I encourage you to read it. It's online. And I'm not going to go through it page by page. But that's the lesson here. That we're already at net zero. But guess what? I hadn't seen this report prior to this morning when I looked at it. I was going to run with this story, and it agrees with the World Wildlife Fund in terms of greenhouse gases being absorbed by the environment. Let's listen to this.
Research into cattle emissions has mostly focused on the animals themselves, but new research happening at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln is focusing on the pastures where cattle graze and the role that it can play in carbon capture.
They've not accounted for the capture part. They've only accounted for methane being lost, and everything else is at balance. Turns out that's not really true.
When it comes to greenhouse gases, you have emissions and capture. Animals emit carbon, or CO2, but the soil and plants that grow in it can capture CO2, and Ericsson's team has found that capture, helped out by cattle grazing and manure, can far outweigh the emissions from cattle.
With adequate precipitation, we're actually seeing that grasslands can take up more CO2 or more carbon in the soil and the plants that offsets the CO2 that cattle are producing, but also offsets the methane.
Erickson and Schweitzer both hope this research won't just correct assumptions about ag's role in climate change.
Yeah, fascinating report. I encourage you to have a look at that. And once again, please subscribe to the station or resubscribe if you must. Share this with your friends and family. It's Sunday and YouTube is sitting on this broadcast. They always used to give me a break on Sunday, but no, have they no decency? It's Sunday. Get off the broadcast, please, and let people watch it. Let new people watch it. Let people subscribe. Stop suppressing, because it really is disgusting beyond belief. Now, I want to get to this. I've saved this towards the end of the broadcast because some of you might find this a little controversial. And you'll say, okay, what does this have to do with Canada? I'll explain after the clip what this has to do with Canada. But a lot of people responded to my poll and my reporting about the Trump feud with Elon Musk by saying, who cares? I don't care. I don't care. Other people said they're playing us. It's all a charade. This is all theater. Very possibly, because look how fast this went. I mean, literally, Trump was praising Elon Musk at his last cabinet minister as being this beacon of free speech, this beacon of government, of this guy who ferrets out government waste, of this dedicated soldier of wasteful, obscene government spending. And he dared anyone in cabinet. I showed this to you the other day. He dared anyone in cabinet to say one word against Elon Musk, anything askance against Elon Musk, because this is my guy, he said. Now, literally 48 hours later, Elon Musk is reiterating his opposition to Trump's big, beautiful bill. And he's making some crazy suggestions that the FBI won't release the Epstein files because they focus on Donald Trump. Now, as a lot of you have pointed out, and people have pointed out to me in the last couple of days, if Donald Trump was really the focus of the Epstein files, if they could really prove he went to Epstein Island and engaged in activities, SA activities, then I think the Democrats would have dropped that like a bomb last October. It would have been the October surprise, just in time for the November presidential election. And believe me, they would have had a field day with that. You can just imagine what they would have done with that information. So I don't think it's true. So I don't know why Elon put that out there and up the ante with this feud. They apparently met on Friday. But Donald Trump is now saying there's no way we can patch things up. I don't know if this feud is a complete charade, if it's a facade, if they're playing us. Politicians always play us. And this is why I tell you every day. I worked on Parliament Hill for over 6 years. And don't trust politicians. They'll always let you down. That's part of the game. That's part of the job description, is letting you down. Because they always have to think of their self-interest first. They'll always think, how am I going to get reelected? That is the primary question in a politician's head. From the moment they are elected, they start working on getting reelected. They start ensuring that they have the financial wherewithal, that they have donors who are going to give them enough money to run the next campaign, that they have the staff, that they have the support, and they focus entirely on getting reelected. In Canada, that means reaching out to a lot of people they might not necessarily like or agree with, but they need them. In the United States, there's all kinds of lobbies, including the Israel lobby, that buys congressmen, that buys senators, and they do it because they need the money, or they just want the money. So politicians will always let you down. But listen to this is from yesterday's Jimmy Dore show, and he's talking about an organization called Palantir. which before last week I had never heard of. But I'll tell you why this is relevant to Canada when we listen to this. This is shocking, by the way. And no, this doesn't mean that I'm anti-Donald Trump. It means I'm anti-government surveillance. It means I'm anti-government in your life.
You said to me, I want to build a social credit system that can be used to enforce control against the American people and basically lock them down with both enforcement and social credit. I would go get the Social Security data, the IRS data, and the Treasury payment data, and that's exactly what they did.
So I wanted to show you this. This is Catherine Fitz. We've had her on the show before, and she was in the George W. Bush administration, and ever since then, she's been kind of a truth teller. So I'm going to play this video of Catherine Austin Fitz, and we'll get your response.
And what it looks to me like Trump and Musk are implementing the control grid at high speed. What you have to say is, okay, to do a control grid, we need a digital ID implemented that's very high quality, high precise. Check the box. We need an all digital financial system. Check the box. You know, we need a way of doing interoperable money. Check the box. If you look at what Doge is doing, we need a social credit system. Check the box.
Wait, what do you mean by that? What Doge is doing?
Danny, they've been aggregating this kind of data. I used to call it the data beast. So they've been aggregating this kind of powerful data since the 90s. So I don't think this is all new. So, for example,
IRS data, healthcare data, and combining it all together into one system combined with AI.
It's interesting because Musk was out raising capital for XAI and had a deal with Palantir AI at the same time.
Okay, I'm going to let the cat out of the bag right now. How does this relate to Canada? Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between Canada and China because we're both trying to develop what is called a social credit system. That means you get points for being on the right side of the government. You get points for being politically correct. You get points for acknowledging DEI. You get points for acknowledging the environment and climate change. You get points for accepting and using green energy. You get points. If you don't get the points, you don't get to travel. You don't get ID. You can't leave the country. And you even are barred from certain foodstuffs. That's how China controls its population. And that's how Mark Carney is going to control the Canadian population. Why do you think he appointed Evan Solomon, that contemptible journalist from CTV, as his AI, artificial intelligence minister? We've never had one before. Why do you think we have one now? Because Carney is preparing a database. He's preparing to unleash a database based in AI. And this is what is being discussed right here. Let's listen to the end of this.
And my guess, I think
Palantir has an AI?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Well, according to published reports, XAI and Palantir had made a partnership, and when Musk was sucking all this data out. And my guess is that data is, they sucked it into the AI on the just do it method. So if I wanted to stop fraud in the U.S. government, I would say there's 20 trillion missing from DOD, there's $1 trillion missing from HUD. I'm going to go in, figure out where it went, and get it back.
Right.
That's not what they did. If you said to me, I want to build a social credit system that can be used to enforce control against the American people and basically lock them down with both enforcement and social credit, I would go get the Social Security data, the IRS data, and the Treasury payment data, and that's exactly what they did.
Once again, if this can happen behind Donald Trump's back, and I'm assuming it is, maybe it's not. Maybe it's not happening behind his back. Maybe he's well aware of this and is facilitating it. It's very possible. But if it can happen in the United States right now, do you not think it's not going to happen in Canada under Mark Carney, the globalist, the WEF crony, the United Nations Goodwill Ambassador for Climate Change? Do you not think it can't happen in Canada if it's happening right now in the United States? This is incredibly important, and this is what the Conservative Party of Canada needs to be talking about right now. But it's not.
So Trump is actually building a control grid of like it's like he's a robot right out of the WEF or China for that matter. It's the exact opposite of what MAGA thought they were voting for, right? I mean, let me just get your response to what she said. That's happening, right?
100%. And Catherine Austin Fitts of Solari does great work. She's part of the Independent Media Alliance that myself and Whitney and Ryan formed. And Catherine has been ahead of this. In fact, that documentary I mentioned from 2006, Catherine was in it. She's been warning about this coming, and she's been able to see this. And I will just point out, too, what she's describing there is it's important for people to understand that deep relationship that Palantir and Peter Thiel and Elon Musk have. I know that there's this, I'm just trying to crack through the illusion that people think Elon is a hero. I personally think that is another psyop that a lot of people are falling into, and Elon may have just played his role and then now he's stepping away. What people need to understand is that Doge, the actual purpose of Doge, as Catherine was outlining there, is to make government more efficient, but not in the sense of make it more efficient to work better for people, but to make it a more technocratic government. And for those who don't really understand or know the history of technocracy, I'll just briefly outline.
So you know what? Hang on.
If you don't mind, Jimmy.
I'm going to actually hold off one second on that, and because I'm going to show that short documentary that you put together, which is very. But just to kind of put a button on this Palantir segment of this of today's show. It took just 6 weeks to go from ICE partnering with Palantir to track immigrants to the government partnering with Palantir to track all Americans. That's from the TrumpFile.org. And here's the guy who runs Palantir. We've showed him before. He's a true psychopath. He's the perfect guy that the CIA would pick to do this job. And Reed Cooley tweets out, CIA agent and head of Palantir, Alex Karp, says his company's software single-handedly stopped the far right in Europe. So let's listen to him say this.
Look, we built PG, which single-handedly stopped the rise of the far right in Europe. We built Foundry, which was just...
So when he says they stopped, so what he's saying is they stopped a populist political movement that was spurred on by open borders policies, that was spurred on by more war and NATO. So what he's saying is this CIA guy, which is what he is, their company couldn't have started or without the money from the CIA. The CIA, there wasn't a company. The CIA gave them billions of dollars and said, go start doing this. And they did it. And so he's bragging that they actually squashed populist political movements. And the way they do the cover for doing that and talking about it publicly is they call it far right. Well, if there's anything more far right than funding literal Nazis, which is what the European Union is doing in Ukraine, that I don't know what it is, because that's what far right is. They're talking about people pushing back against open borders and people pushing back against censorship. That's not far right. That used to be called unions activity in the United States and lefties, but they call it far right, just like they call me far right. So and
I interviewed Jimmy Dore twice last week. This is a guy who's a lifelong Democrat who decided the Democratic Party really wasn't for him anymore because it was suppressing free speech. It was working against free speech. It was supporting massive lockdowns. It was supporting COVID-19 mandates that he didn't agree with. It wasn't supporting people anymore. So now Jimmy Dore is far right? Yes, anybody who disagrees with this narrative is far right. Alt-right. That's what alt-right isn't being used as much anymore. Now it's far right. So if you're a populist, you're far right. So what's going on here? Why is the Trump administration and Elon Musk working with a group like Palantir when they are rooting out far-right forces or populist forces around the world?
Time the establishment wants to discredit you or dismiss you, they call you far-right. And that's what he's doing there. What he's really admitting to is that we, the CIA, use their technology to stop a populist political movement. The same kind of populist political movement MAGA thought Donald Trump was going to be. And it turns out he was a wolf in sheep's clothing, and it was a Trojan horse. Because now that Donald Trump is inside the beast, he's unleashing pukes like this on you. And he's going to create a social credit system for you. He's going to create a digital ID for you and digital banking. And it's all going to be undone under one thing. And it's all going to be run by guys like this, not people you vote for.
Yes. Have a look at the whole interview. on Jimmy Dore's station. It is fascinating. I'm not going to take any more of his material there, but it's wonderful what he's saying. And why do you think we have an AI minister now? Why do you think Mark Carney? What do you think Mark Carney is working towards? He's announced his intention, obliquely announced his intention to have a digital currency in Canada, because we will no longer be allowed to have transactions above $10,000 in cash. You can put all your money in the bank, but you'll never see it again. This is what Mark Carney is up to, globalist international banker. This is what Mark Carney is trying to achieve in Canada. There is no question in my mind that his intentions are nefarious and villainous. And this is what he's trying to do here. So don't be surprised if we have more bills where this material, this agenda is obliquely introduced about 75% into the bill. And you've got to read the fine print. This is what happened with the Strong Borders Bill. And where is Pierre Poilievre? Where is the Conservative Party of Canada saying, stop Bill C2? Where are they? Why aren't they worried about digital currency? Are they supporting it quietly? We need to know where the Conservative Party of Canada stands on Bill C2. They refuse to say. This is what Pierre Poilievre is doing instead. Now, he's doing his Mayor Tommy Shanks routine just about every day now. And I think he says some good things here. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Poilievre's full of crap. Poilievre is right on with liquid natural gas. But why isn't he talking about Bill C2? Why isn't he talking about the dangers of nuclear war as we continue to spend billions of dollars on Ukraine, which he supports? Why is he not saying, hey, let's stop giving Ukraine money. Let's stop the war. Why isn't he saying that? Because we're steps away from nuclear war. Why isn't he acknowledging that?
So, you want to save the world. You want to end poverty.
I want to save the world from a nuclear confrontation, Pierre. That's what I'd like to do. But apparently you don't want to talk about that. You want to talk about saving the world from poverty by reducing our carbon footprint.
Well, the answer is not to chain yourself to a tree or protest for yet another international aid bureaucracy or government program. No, the answer to both is more Canadian energy.
And he's
right
right
out
there.
Of poverty is cheap, clean, reliable Canadian energy to heat and cool homes and workplaces, energy to move people and the stuff they need, energy to grow nutritious food. Energy defeats poverty. As for saving the planet.
And by the way, I'm going to be sharing a new British documentary that's out there, and it exposes why the WEF and the globalists want to destroy the family farm. Then they do. I'm so glad Poilievre here is saying we need family farms. We need farmers. They feed us. They feed the world. Canadian farmers feed the world. Liberals might think the groceries that in the grocery store just magically appear from someplace, and they're just magically in those trucks. And they don't like to give farmers credit for anything, except they like to destroy the family farm. And we will end up, if we don't fight back, folks, if we don't fight back what Mark Carney's doing right now, if we don't fight the globalist agenda, we will be eating insects and we will be eating food that's produced in factories. And it looks like crap and it tastes like crap. But the globalists will still have real T-bone steaks. They'll have filet mignon. They'll have prime rib. They'll have the best roasted chickens. I'm getting hungry just talking about it. But yes, it will continue for the globalists, but not for you and I.
Well, what is the greatest source of greenhouse gases in the world today? Coal-fired electricity in Asia. A Fraser Institute report showed that coal supplies 54% of China's and 56% of India's energy consumption. Coal use is up 66% in the 2 decades leading up to the present. In Asia, it's up 182%. Similarly, China quadrupled new coal power added to its grid in 2022 and has 6 times as many coal-fired plants under construction as the rest of the world combined. Replacing this coal with clean Canadian natural gas, which has half the carbon emissions for each unit of energy it produces, would displace millions of tons of greenhouse gas emissions. Exporting 1 billion cubic feet a day of Canadian LNG to China would therefore reduce global emissions by 15 million tons of CO2 every single year, doubling Canada's production from the current 18 million BCF per day, and sending the extra gas to replace coal overseas would cut global emissions by as much as 630 million tons of CO2 every year. That's almost the amount of the entire Canadian economy. Let me say that again. Doubling Canadian natural gas production, liquefying it and sending it overseas to displace dirty coal would reduce emissions globally by almost as much as the total emissions of all of Canada.
All right. We're just going to visit the store, and I'll come back with my concluding remarks. Thank you for staying with me. We'll be right back. Yes. And I would encourage you, I was going to wear this today and I totally forgot. But yes, I encourage you. Get one of these hats. They are really fantastic. But why did I do this episode today? Why did I talk about some of these issues? I'm concerned, folks, that we are nearing the precipice of not just economic catastrophe, but an authoritarian state. We've been talking about it for years. And a lot of people think we're crying wolf. A lot of people think we're just saying things for the effect. We talked about this throughout the entire 9.5 years of Justin Trudeau. But it's happening right now before our eyes. The Conservative Party is not doing much about it. I want to see Pierre Poilievre do another video. That was a great video, and I might show more of it tomorrow because he's right. We need to be selling our liquid natural gas. We can supplant all of those coal-fired plants in India and China, and we can make a difference. But believe me, carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. It's not pollution. We need carbon dioxide. Plants and trees need carbon dioxide to live. So this is, once again, a emotionally structured hysteria. And I guess all hysteria is emotionally structured, but this is an emotionally structured argument. And it's in the end, we need to focus on freedom in Canada. That's what we need to focus on. And I want to see Poilievre come out with the video on Bill C2 and why it's eroding our freedom, why it's potentially taking away our free speech, why it's creating massive government surveillance, why it's leading us to digital currency, and why Mark Carney is a clear and present threat to Canadian freedom. I'm not hearing that much anymore because I know what's going on. Pierre Poilievre is just biding his time right now until he can get that by-election over with and get back in the House of Commons. I understand that. But that doesn't mean you have peace with Mark Carney. And you just continue to say, we're going to promote, we're going to support anything he puts out that it advances something different from the status quo. Well, that really is a meaningless statement because just about everything Mark Carney is doing right now is a departure from the status quo. Departing from the status quo isn't necessarily a good thing. It can be, but it can also be a very bad thing. Anyway, I probably said enough today. I've got Kyle Kemper on the show tomorrow. We'll better confirm that. We're going to be talking about digital currency. We're going to be talking about cryptocurrency. And I'm going to have your comments live. So if you've got questions you want Kyle to answer, I'm going to focus on the questions. This is going to be a question and answer session with Kyle Kemper, who is an expert on cryptocurrency. I'm not. I'm going to learn something tomorrow too. But Kyle knows this stuff. This is what he does as an entrepreneur. He is an expert on cryptocurrency, and he understands the dangers of digital currency. Tuesday, Naomi Wolf, my good friend, she'll be on talking about mandates, her latest book, and her fight to continue to promote free speech everywhere. We've got Jeff Rath on Wednesday or Thursday to talk about the latest in the Alberta independence movement. And Friday morning, we've got Danielle Smith, Premier of Alberta, on the show. I hope you all tune into that. We're going to be talking about the Alberta Accord, and we're going to be talking about how she is meeting, and I'll use this word because it's neutral, the challenge of Alberta independence, how she is meeting that as the Premier of the province and the leader of the United Conservative Party, where about 65 to 70% of the membership and the voters support Alberta independence. And of course, she does not. She can't. She's the Premier of a province. She's a federalist. So how is she bridging that? That's what I'm going to be asking Danielle, an old friend of mine who I respect deeply, and I have a lot of love and respect for, and a great, great Premier that I'd love to have her on the show. And she'll be on, like I said, I'm interviewing her late Thursday. She'll be on Friday. You'll see the interview Friday. Thank you for watching today, folks. I think we had a decent audience for a change. I think they might have lifted their finger a bit, but it's been fun. And we'll be back again tomorrow with all the news you need to know, live from Ottawa. This has been David Krayden. God bless what's left of this country, and Godspeed to all of you.